In this video, we're going to talk about Robby's face, and this is going to be part one because there are still some other areas to discuss here. Specifically, I've already covered electroplating the sax keys on Robby and creating the sax rests. In this video, we're going to look at these clear parts. These little rods are bent acrylic rods, and these radiator valves or cylinders, if you will, here, they're resin 3D printed, as are the little covers. So we're going to talk about that, and also, obviously, motorizing the sax keys as well. Let's start by just getting right into bending these acrylic rods. In the kitchen, bending acrylic rods. So I've made these various little bendy devices. A quick demo of bending one of the rods, which has the different angles for one of the pieces in the head. I've just made this little bending assistance block here. I'm going to open up the oven behind me, grab the acrylic rod, which has been heating at about 210 degrees, push it into the block, bend it down, and basically just hold it there until it cools, and that will give us one of the more complicated, well, not super complicated, but just one of these pieces that has the two bends in it. Now it's cooled off, and it just simply lifts right out of the block. So I just got this box from PCBWay. I've just broken the tape here. These are some parts I ordered for Robby's head, for his face specifically. And I'm just gonna unbox here. I haven't looked at it. I'm very excited. But I thought I would also just give you guys an idea of how they package stuff, because quality of the parts aside, it could be fantastic. If it gets broken on the way being shipped to you, then it's worthless. So first, I mean, the cardboard itself is super stiff. So I'm very happy. The box is very firm. I open it up here, and you can see it looks very nicely packaged, very carefully packaged inside. And every piece that I ordered is or if they're in groups, they're individually wrapped and labeled. So, and you can see they're wrapped in foam. So initially I'm very excited because whatever got here safely. Like I said, if you're paying for this, if you're waiting for this, and you're excited about your project, this is great. A lot of care and attention paid to with the shipping here. Now let's get to the meat of stuff, right? I don't know which one I want to open first here. I really don't know what's in any of these, so we'll just play it by ear. I'll open this bag first. I don't want to drop anything on the floor. But let's see here. These are supposed to be, okay, unveiling. These are supposed to be clear parts for, wow, okay. All right, already. So obviously resin printed. Hopefully this will stay in focus here. This is really nice. I mean, come on. Look at this. Now I have an SLA printer, resin printer, and I can print stuff in clear, but something like this that's hollow inside, it needs supports, and invariably, the supports, you take those off, you clean it up. It's very hard to get these things perfectly clear. So I'm seeing the very tiniest. If I hit it at just the right angle, like maybe a slight sort of very waviness, like old glass or something, from a house in the 1800s, like a little tiny, I mean, God, this is fantastic. It's the first piece I've unwrapped here. So that piece, these must be all the pieces for the head, or for that, that have the sax valves in between. So those pieces go in the middle. That's one of the pieces this is one of the bigger pieces for the end. A little tiny bit of fogginess right in there where the two pieces meet. But that's a couple of tiny, I mean, way better than anything I can get on my printer. And when you look at the original Robby, they've actually, and I don't know how many times they've been replaced over the years, they've clearly yellowed. So I'm going to assume in this package right here are the rest of the parts for the Sachs valve. So, you know, I don't know. Time will tell if these things will yellow. Let's open up another bag here and see what we've got. Again, just nice tape here. Pulls off very easily. Well, mostly easily here. I'll rip this little piece of tape here. And what do we have here? I have a feeling these are the little, oh my gosh, again, these things are beautiful. These are the little sort of dots that hold the pipe in. Let's see if I can sort of do these justice. Where the Sachs valve attaches, they're like little, they're perfect. Do I have one around that? I printed one on my FDM printer just as a test, and of course, nowhere near as clear as this. And then I printed a resin one myself. I mean, this is like, it's fantastic. If you just saw with the light hitting it the right way, that's awesome. All right, I'll just take a couple of those out. Let's put that aside. I don't want to lose anything here. Let's see what's in the next bag. I'm sure if I looked at the invoice, I could correlate. All these things are labeled with barcodes and everything from them. I'm sure I could go back to my order and look it up, but there's just something fun and Christmas Day morning-esque here about unwrapping these pieces. Oh, okay. Very nice. One of the radiator pieces. And I had a piece of this. Originally, it probably would have been acrylic, turned on a lathe. And I had a piece like that. And when I went to, and probably flame polished. Well, when I went to flame polish it, and I have pinball machines, I have some experience with flame polishing the ramps, the plexi ramps on the pinball machine. I could not get it clear enough, which is why I decided that I wanted to order it. This thing is, oh, my hand is just, just so nervous. It looks so good. I hope it's coming through a little bit on the video here. It looks so great. It's got the little, you know, opening in the sides where I will put in the acrylic rod. Let me grab, I've got a little piece over here. This is not the correct, I don't know how it's going to fit, but let's just see. So this is the 1/4-inch acrylic rod, the opening there. Oh, it fits. That's a relief. It goes in there and it fits perfectly. So when I bend those pieces, I don't want that to roll off the table here. Okay, so the rest of these pieces are probably, let's open it up here. There was the invoice in here. The rest of these pieces are probably going to be other, I think what John Riggs calls again, like the sort of the radiator valves, because they you know, they sort of have fins on it like a radiator. Let's see here. Be very careful with these. I can feel this is, I think, 2 of the ones for the side. Wow, four in here. Okay. These are other clear pieces. Just really fantastic quality. You know, PCBWay did give me a credit towards some of these parts, and so I am going to say that they, you know, give them credit as a sponsor for this video, but the quality speaks for itself. I mean, it's the first time I've ordered anything transparent from them. I've seen other people order transparent cases for computer projects and for other electronic projects. So I had some faith that they would be able to do these pieces to this level of quality. But again, seeing that pay off, having the parts come here, and just meeting all expectations, exceeding expectations is fantastic. Oh, and I think these are going to be the round pieces that go by the sides of the Sachs valve. These were, there looks like there's orange behind them, or that they were painted orange inside, but I think these were put on before the, and that's actually that orangish reddish color is the color of the material that Robby was constructed of. And so what you're actually seeing is the unpainted material. I mean, this is so clear, it's practically invisible on the camera here. So I will probably put a little delicate, a little flex to it. I will probably put like a reddish orange piece of something behind it. I don't think I'll paint the insides of this to duplicate the original effect, but just fantastic quality here with these parts. Just really, I'm super pleased with these. So it is possible, obviously, to print clear parts on a consumer resin printer. Here's a little statue of myself that I did on Elegoo Saturn, and you can see this is pretty clear. Hopefully I can, try and maybe get a little bit of focus there, but there's no layer lines. I'm generally happy with how this worked out. But when I went to print some of the parts for Robby's head, because they're hollow and open, I had to use support material, and maybe you can see a couple little spots there. Well, here, I'll just hold these two pieces up next to one another here. Let's look at from the PCB ones on a more industrial resin printer, and these are a little bit cloudy. Now, there hasn't been a lot of processing on this, but normally to get something clear, what I would do is maybe I'd light sand it and I'd hit it with a spray coat of like a spray-on polyurethane coating or some type of spray-on top coat, and that will fill in just you can't even feel, but the super small artifacts from coming off the resin printer. But again, when if it's a piece like this and it's solid and you hit it with that coating, the transparency really comes out. If it's a piece like this, you really need to hit it. If it's hollow, you need to hit it from both sides. But this is so tiny to try and hit this from the inside. It's basically impossible. Now, there is one other thing that I did notice though about the parts that came, and I don't think it's going to be a factor. But take, for example, this piece that I printed, and it's a little bit thicker. But you will, let's see if I can, what's the best angle for this here? There is a notch, and that's intentional. That notch is where the key fits in, and so it's very smooth, and that notch is uniform and it's open the whole way, as it is on the file itself. What I noticed from the prints that I did here is that they've sort of that I received is they've pinched in a little bit towards the bottom, and there is a little bit of flex. So what'll happen is that will actually pinch. I can't even put the key in there. I can put it in towards the top and I can force it, but actually it's pinched in so much that it will hold that piece in there. And that might present a problem for the free movement of the key. We'll see, but I know there is a little bit of flex to this, so I might be able to print a spacer to just kind of pry it open a little bit. That's just something as I continue to install the parts in the head. We'll get to that soon, and we'll see if that's a factor. So again, that's, consumer printers are perfectly capable of printing, clear and transparent and translucent items, certainly. But again, when you look at what I was able to get from, the printer myself versus the glass-like quality, frankly, that I got from the parts that PCB printed, there's no comparison, and obviously no finish work, no elbow grease for myself. Just spec it, order it, and it arrives fantastic like that. I've already glued in the little buttons in front, so I'm getting ready to install the other plastic rods and the little radiator tubes, but I don't have any holes here along the bottom, so I made this little piece to just line up here, and I will then drill out those holes and position the pieces correctly. So let me get on to that part. So we've got the plastic radiator valves here. We've got the acrylic rods cut and trimmed here, a few extras. And I've got the cutting template here on the head. So I'm just going to dry fit these things together, make sure I have everything lined up properly before I drill it. There'll still be a little bit of wiggle room once it is drilled, so it doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but I'm just going to dry fit things now just to try and get things as close to perfect as possible. Now that these holes have been drilled and cleaned up and deburred, I think the next step I'm going to try is setting up the sort of plastic tubes, the radiator little sections here along the face here, the 4 of those, and at the same time connecting the acrylic tubes to the buttons. I think it's important before actually gluing any of this stuff together that, to do a little dry fitting test and make sure things are working correctly. So I've got my little pieces of plastic that I've cut and bent here. And I made some cutting tools. Okay, so first of all, the holes, I've taken these little bottom radiators here, and they are just friction fit into the little holes that I drilled previously. This horizontal piece I've already glued into place and test fit that. Now with these other longer plastic pieces here, I'm just going to gently put them in and line them up and make sure everything looks good. There's a little bit of flexibility, and I'll probably won't use CA glue for this. I'll probably use something that I can change later on if I want, that I can remove a little easier. Let's see if we can get that piece in here. And this guy here. So all the pieces seem to fit together pretty nicely. That piece is a little loose, but again, when it's glued into place, it'll be fine. And now I think also looking at this from the side here, just to make sure, let's see here, just to make sure everything is fitting and lining up the way that we want. Again, if I look here, all those pieces, the alignment looks really good, even that one little piece on the end. So that's what we want to see, that when you look at it from the side, everything is lined up perfectly. For gluing the acrylic rods into the head, I'm going to use a combination of glues. The end of each rod, I'm going to put a little bit of this E6000 clear, transparent, sort of rubbery adhesive, mostly permanent-ish. And but inside the button and the little radiator piece, I'm going to put just a drop of CA glue, just the tiniest little bit. So if I had to ever, pop it out, I can. But for the most part, it'll be there for the long haul. So very carefully, one little drop inside the reservoir there. One little drop inside the button there. And then carefully putting the rod in the bottom and in the middle. And now just a question of holding it straight. Now you'll notice I have not glued the base in here yet. That'll let me, once this stiffens up, that will let me do some more fine-tuning adjustments to the alignment of all the rods. The next thing that I think we need to worry about are the supports here. There's a 2.5 millimeter brass rod that goes through the various plastic pieces here that screw into the head, and that will also hold the sax keys. Now I have the holes here that I've made for, I don't know what we want to call these, but the covers that the sax keys will basically hang from. The little plastic pieces that go inside there, or that go in between them rather, and there will be 5 of them in between each one of these. I don't have any really way to mount or position that. And the position here is super critical because this rod has to fit through all of them and has to line up perfectly across everything. So I love making templates. I mean, here's some. I made this template for positioning the sax rests and the keys, and I made this other template. And of course, the solution here, I think, is, again, to make another template. And my thoughts are, the way I've made this is I will position a couple of these, let's call them again, these clear sax covers. And these are some scrap ones that I had that I resin printed myself earlier. That's why they're a little bit cloudier than the last pair I made. Then I've made this little strip that will go over the top and fit perfectly there. And in between, I have these openings where I can mount, and these will fit perfectly, these little half globes that are really just cosmetic. And so the thought is, as I feed the rod through here, you'll see, for example, if I just put the one in the middle here, if I have a few of these in place, that I can position and then glue them all properly. And yeah, it is a little bit tricky because there's a little bit of flex to the rod and you've got to have everything positioned perfectly. Of course, how am I gonna, I can't put the glue behind it now, so I will have to actually position it and glue it while I am, threading this rod through, and I'll have to do that for all 5. So my thoughts are I can't use something like CA glue here. It'll probably cure a little bit too quickly. And also, my other concern is that a little bit of CA glue would drip out and hold this in place, and it would all just become a terrible mess. So I think, again, I'm going to go to my new friend there, that E6000 glue, which has got a little bit of flex and is mostly permanent. And since there's really not going to be any weight or force on these things, I think they'll be fine. If I had to peel them off because something went awry in the gluing process, I think that would be okay. So that is the plan I am going to try. We have just these little temporary Sachs key covers in place here. I've just lined them all up with the rod just to make sure everything fits smoothly, and likely I'll have to adjust them as I go. And so now will come the process of taking one of these little decorative little caps here, putting a little glue on the back, putting it through here, feeding the rod through, and moving all through the series here. Again, I'm just going to use a little bit of this E6000, and I'm going to put a little bit on the back of the piece here, off camera. Maybe on camera, why not? It's a little bit high here, but and it's fairly easy to clean this up. It can be a little sticky or a little drippy sometimes. I'm going to try and get this lined up fairly accurately. And that's one done. And the rod should hold it while it dries. I am just going to put a little piece of tape over the top just to hold it down a little bit more snugly here, but it should be fine. And now I'll go on and do the rest of them. All the mini little covers, little globes here are now in place and taped down, so we'll let that dry overnight and carefully remove the little mounting jig that I created here. Hopefully that'll peel off relatively easily, and then we will take stock of any other little steps that we might need to secure them in place. Hopefully they're pretty strong and stable, and then we'll move on to the clear Sachs valve covers here, which should be easier because those actually have the openings and can be glued from the inside a little more easily. I very patiently let this dry here for 24 hours, so let's see what the results are. I have a feeling that maybe there's a little bit of adhesion to my sort of plastic positioning jig that I created here, but again, hopefully that glue is flexible enough and removable that it won't be a problem. So let's see. I mean, I can actually take these out as well. There shouldn't be any glue on them because there was none in the vicinity. Now the fun part, though, is delicately peeling this off. And yeah, there's a little bit of adhesion there. Again, around where the globes were attached. Let's see. Hopefully we can just wiggle it off a little bit. Well, coming off okay. Oh, that one the globe came off, so that's going to be an issue. It's more adhered to the... I don't know if scoring it with the razor, I'm more worried I'm going to scratch the globe itself. That one's off. That one's off. And that one's off. So, and it took a little bit of the paint off on the back also when, on this one right here, if you could see that. But I think when the globe is reattached on there, it looks like a little bit of cleanup necessary, but I think I can just gently clean that up because the glue is flexible with my finger. So the good news is I don't think the ones that did attach are going to go anywhere. The bad news is that this one I'm going to have to attempt to glue again. But hopefully, as I said, hopefully that will. I think when it's on there, yeah, you will not see when you look at it. I might touch up the paint and re-glue it on there. I have to decide. What I'm going to do there. I think I might just put a little bit of coat, but you really don't see anything when it's on there. So I will clean these pieces up and try and re-glue this one. The other ones seem on there very sturdy. For the mechanism here to motorize the sax keys, I'm basically using this design. I've enhanced it and made parts a little bit thicker for strength and for durability, but this is Robot Hut's design on Thingiverse, aka John Riggs. You can search Robot Hut, Blockhead Robby on Thingiverse and YouTube. He has this machine that's just Robby's head, so he calls it the Blockhead Robby machine, and I'll be using just a slightly modified version of his, but basically his mechanism, so I won't go into details now about how this is connected or mounted inside because Robot Hut already has a whole video presentation. His files are up on Thingiverse, and he has linked instructional videos for how to print it and assemble it. I spoke too soon when I thought I could utilize John Riggs' existing motor mount design. Certainly I took a lot of inspiration from it. The reason why is because the thickness of the Blockhead Robby machine for which he designed his motor mount, I think is different than the thickness that I'm using for my print of the head for Robby. And the other item is, John glued his parts directly into the frame, and I always like this idea of anything that's motorized or could potentially go wrong, I want it to be removable. So the parts, this base plate that you see here in yellow, that's the part that will glue to the inside of Robby's head. And I'll show in a second when I show in the slicer, it's printed with some captive M3 nuts in here to screw it in. So no heat set inserts, you print it, you insert the nuts right as part of the printing process. Then there are these mounts, which you can see screw through. And there's a little bit of space here. I erred on the side of it being a little bit close to the inside of the sax keys. What I mean by space is, the idea, you could see there's sort of these little risers here, but you can insert washers, obviously, between these pieces if you need to back them off a little bit. The motor axle that's unmodified. That's still John Riggs' design right there. The other parts that, I thickened up these pieces here, again, just for longevity and stability inside the head. And the other two pieces I designed are these two 3D printable mounting nuts here. And so what you will use those for is when you take that base plate and you screw it inside the head, you can use those nuts to hold it into position and to screw it down tight while the glue dries. The motor mount base, which is going to be glued inside of Robby's head and is going to hold the actual motor and axle itself, that's going to be printed using captive nuts. So rather than heat set inserts, which get heated up and inserted into the filament later on, captive nuts are a way of printing where we just build the mechanical fastener right into the part. So here is, I'm using Orca Slicer here, and this is the mounting base plate for the motor. And if I just back off through the different layers here, you'll see right there, there's a point where before the layers are filled in, as it turns out, let's see if we can zoom in a little bit here, there are these openings for little M3 nuts. And you want to get to the point in your slice or whatever you're using, not here where the top layer is, obviously, it's too late to put the nuts in then, but right here, just before the top layer over that opening has been printed, and you want to insert a pause or whatever your slicer lets you do to stop the printer at that point, and generate the G-code and print this out. And as you'll see in the next stage here, when this pause is hit, you'll have an opportunity to drop the nuts in, and then when you resume the print, they'll just be printed over and sealed into place. When the printer pauses, because it's reached that stop you've set in the G-code, the print head should move out of the way. That gives you a chance to insert little M3 nuts into each of the openings here. And when you're done, you should be able to resume the print job. And then these nuts will be held in place by the next layers of filament that go on top. So I like this approach, using captive nuts more than heat set inserts. I think there's less room for error. And next you'll want to just go on and print the other parts to mount the motor and to hold the axle on each side. Okay, I think this is a little bit easier here if I do this at floor level, but we'll see. So first, I've printed the 4 parts, well, not including the axle here, but for the mechanism that motorizes the Sachs keys, there's the base plate in the back, the center mount, and the left and the right pieces. And I've also printed the different parts of Robot Hut, aka John Riggs' axle for this. And again, this design is a modified version of what's on his Thingiverse page. I'll put the links in the description. But so first, printed that out, wired it correctly. Again, watch his videos. I'll link to them below for how you put his version together. Very similar to my modifications. Next, here is the head. And I've installed 4 test Sachs keys, and I've printed out these 3D sort of pass-through bolts. I'll show you in a second inside. Those are going to temporarily hold the mounting plate in place while we test it. So I can't take it out and show you because the brass rod that holds these keys is already in place in front of it. But if we look inside, let's see here if we can see in there, you can see those 2 black rings coming through. That's the other side. They're threaded. That's the part of the bolt that's passing through there. And why we're using those 2 holes in particular, the ones right here, is because if we look at the motor mount, there's space here for those 2 right here and right here. It's not going to be hit by the mounting plate. So the idea is, you'll put this on the inside, line it up using those 2 3D printed bolts, screw the backing on so you'll hold it temporarily, flush and tight to the dome, test it out, put some batteries in the motor, make sure it's working correctly. Then if everything is good, put the glue of your choice on the, take the bolts off, put the glue of your choice on the back, and again, use those bolts to hold it down while that glue is drying. Then when the glue is dry, take the bolts out, take the rod out, and insert the remaining 2 Sachs keys. Now I'm going to take the base plate here and carefully position it over the 2 plastic bolts I've printed. And now that it's in place, I'm kind of going to delicately put one of the nuts on this side while I'm holding it, holding the nut on the other side too, and hopefully screw that on. Oops. Let's try that again here. It's a little finicky operation. So that's one side twisted down. And I'll come over here to the other side. Put this nut on. If the cams are in the way, you can slowly, gently move them. So that's tight against it. So now it's time to test it and see if it works. Now, since the pieces in the front are not glued in, they're not being held flush to the head yet, so I'm going to hold them temporarily with my thumbs. But you can see that, I can move my hands out of the way, they are all striking correctly. And since the ones on the ends are striking, I'm sure the two where the bolts are going to strike too. Now this key isn't coming down because I do need to do a little bit of sanding. It's getting a little bit hung up inside there, but they are all being struck correctly from the back, so I think we're in good shape here. So the remaining step, or the next step now, is to take the plate off, apply some glue, and then we will install the remaining keys and test the whole thing out. Well, I've done some test fittings, so I think it's time to finally glue this piece in. And it was designed so that the motors in the shaft could be separated, and so I don't have to glue it all in as one piece here, but I'm frankly just a little bit lazy. I'm not going to unscrew all these things. I think I can fumble with it a little bit and get all this stuff glued in here correctly. I'm going back to the E6000 glue. So I'll grab a little bit of that and put a little around here on the corners and on the front here. You can see me on camera just putting a little bit on here. And now I'm going to line it up and again use these little 3D printed bolts that I made to both line it up and secure it for gluing here. So you can't see on the other side here. I'm going to line that up and then just screw it on. Well, it's kind of a multi-handed job here. Hold on, maybe we'll try. A little bit of a juggling act here. There we go. Once you get one on, the other one should be easier. Just going to hand tighten it. Should be fine. Actually, I want it a little bit loose for 1 second, and I'll show you why. Because there is still a tiny little bit of play with those two 3D printed bolts on there. So what I have also done is 3D printed these two little white cylinders, which are equivalent to the inside diameter. And this is going to help me line it up. If I flip the head around here a little bit, what I'm going to do here is push these in a couple of the holes that don't have the bolts in it, just to line them up, get them perfectly lined up. So I know if those cylinders go in, it'll be perfectly aligned. Okay, so the cylinder is in there. So once those cylinders are in, and I know the motor mount is perfectly lined up here, now I can screw these, tighten these things down. Okay, we'll let that dry, and then we'll install the Sachs keys and the covers. The motor mount has dried overnight, so in a few minutes, well, now I can just take out these little spacing cylinders, but I'll unscrew the bolts in a couple of minutes, and the next step is I'm going to mount the little plastic Sachs valve covers. Now, something I noticed, and maybe the camera will get this in focus here, let's see, is that if you look at the notch here, now this is a cylinder, but if you'll notice, it's a little bit closed in towards the bottom. Somehow this little ring, the little bottom, it just kind of closed in during the printing process a little bit. And what I've noticed is that whereas at the top it's open the whole way, at the bottom it's actually not loose. I mean, it will basically pinch the Sachs valve. And although the valve does, the key sort of does come here, and that shouldn't be an issue, it can get hung up there on the bottom and get pinched a little bit. So I 3D printed just some little 6mm spacers, and when I go to glue these in, what I'm going to do is just use that to just spread the gap open just enough so that there's no friction on the sides. So my plan is to, again, unscrew this, and what I'm going to do is just take, again, a little E6000 glue, put it around the inside of the hole here, and then basically with the little spacer, you know, put the covers in there, slide the little spacer in to keep it open. Now this one actually goes in one of the middle ones. This is not an end piece. And you know, I'll put the rod through to line everything up and tape it down. And once that's dried, we should be ready to do a test with the actual mechanicals for animating the Sachs keys. This stuff should be dry now, so time to take out the brass rod, install the keys, and take it for a test drive. You can also take out these little spacers. And we'll take out this rod. For the keys now, it's just going to be a matter of carefully threading each one of them through here, which is a little hard at this angle that I'm trying to do to show you, but there we go. So I'll just move along and thread all of these through. If you've glued everything in place properly, it should not be too difficult, but sometimes there can be a little flex in that rod, and you may need to just push it from the back with a little screwdriver to get it through, which is what I'm going to do now. Finish putting in the rest of the keys. Doesn't hurt to do a quick test to make sure all the keys move freely, so I'm just going to turn the head upside down. Okay, here we go. Nothing. So clearly the motors are hung up there a little bit. Okay, so based on what I can see, since that one key kind of goes up and locks, I don't know if I can get my hand up in here, but it's just this one key on the end. Once the motor's past there, we seem to be fine. So it's just that one key, the contacts, the little leaves that sort of hit it, are just a tiny bit too long, and that's why when I designed the motor mount in there, we have a couple of options. One is I can put some washers and just space just that little part of the axle out a tiny little bit, or I could also just use a razor or some sandpaper and just on that axle, the little arm that sort of triggers that hits the metal key, I could shorten it that way. I think the first thing I'm going to try is, since it seems to be just so close, I'm going to just put a couple of washers in there and just space it a tiny bit. And this was not unexpected because the head was printed in multiple pieces and, you know, glued and sanded together and everything. So is it possible there's a tiny amount of distortion when we're talking about some of these tight tolerances that we need here? Of course. And that's another reason why I think it's important to be able to remove it, to make these adjustments. So I will be, through the magic of video, I'll be back in a few moments for you, and we'll see what happens. I've added about 1 millimeter's worth of washers just to the key here on the end, to the motor mount, just to space it out just a tiny little bit. And let's see what happens. Looking good. Now, when I cut the power, I cut the power just the right time when all the keys are flat again. Hold on, let me see if I can do that again. Probably not if I tried. Okay, future item. So I cut the power in the middle, and this key happens to be raised. I think really what we want to happen is all the keys, when you cut the power, all the keys to be flat. I can't really think of a way to do that with a mechanical mechanism. I'm not sure how they did it on the original. It's possible they didn't, and maybe you know, the actor or a technician just lowered all the keys. I think in the next version of this design, I'm going to try maybe a sensor, like a little Hall sensor on the motor shaft, or on the motor mount, and a little magnet on the shaft, and figure out a way. Of course, I'll have to introduce a microcontroller then, but basically figure out a way to, you know, push a button, have it do a couple seconds like Robby does in the movies, just a couple seconds of the keys moving, and then stop with them all lowered. Okay, we covered a lot of material, and there's still more to do on the face. The little flappers here, not sure if I'm going to use John Riggs' design or my own ideas maybe for a little servo or solenoid. The gyros here for the head, still need to talk about those, motorizing them and designing these. At some point I'm going to actually have to get up the courage to cut my dome and install that on here as well. And then we've still got obviously his mouth, his arms here, but we're getting closer. So a lot of progress in this video. If you like this stuff, please consider subscribing. There are definitely going to be more videos to come tracking progress on Robby. I'll see you soon.